There exists a silent assumption buried deep within the modern psyche, an inherited myth that to be safe, to be successful, to be whole, one must be in control, control over circumstances, control over people, control over time, even control over the self. But this assumption is not only false, it is the very source of the psychic fractures we carry. What we call control is, more often than not, fear wearing the mask of certainty. When we attempt to master life with the intellect alone, we separate ourselves from the very currents that seek to carry us toward meaning. We fracture the psyche into compartments, the part that performs, the part that hides, the part that pleases, the part that rebels. Each fragment battles for dominion, shouting over the others, until the inner world becomes a courtroom of conflict rather than a sanctuary of integration. The illusion of control divides us against ourselves. This inner division manifests externally: anxiety when things don't go as planned, rage when life refuses to obey, despair when our efforts yield emptiness. We tighten our grip on routines, identities, and relationships, not out of strength, but out of a desperate need to keep chaos at bay. And yet, the tighter we hold, the more brittle we become. Life does not bend to our will. It reveals its will when we become willing to see. The origin of this illusion can be traced back to the ego, the surface self that believes it is the center of the universe. The ego is terrified of surrender, for surrender implies trust in a wisdom it cannot control, in a force it cannot understand. It resists the unknown, even though it is in the unknown that the deepest parts of the soul are found. To live under the illusion of control is to exile ourselves from the richness of the unconscious, where archetypes stir and symbols speak in dreams. These hidden dimensions of the psyche do not obey commands. They respond to invitation. They awaken not through force, but through permission, permission to feel what is raw, to face what is unresolved, to embrace what is emerging without needing to dominate it. The more we chase control, the more we lose the subtle connection to meaning. True meaning arises not from manipulation of the external, but from alignment with the internal. An alignment cannot be engineered like a schedule or a project plan. It must be listened to like a whisper, discovered like a forgotten memory, trusted like a path that unfolds only as we walk it. Control is not mastery. It is resistance dressed as order, and resistance, when directed inward, leads to repression. We push away the parts of ourselves we deem weak, irrational, chaotic. We exile grief. We silence intuition. We numb longing. But what we suppress does not vanish. It transforms into shadow, and shadow, when ignored, does not disappear. It leaks into our thoughts, our choices, our relationships. Conflict begins not with the world outside us, but with the parts within us that we refuse to accept. The need for control is a symptom of disconnection. Disconnection from mystery, from the body, from instinct, from the ancient voice of the soul that speaks not in commands, but in currents, images, and symbols. To attempt to control life is to try to silence that voice. And to silence that voice is to live in noise, in constant internal noise, where no true peace can ever take root. There is a hidden intelligence operating beneath the surface of our waking life, an ancient, primal awareness that does not speak in words, but in dreams, images, and impulses. This is the unconscious, the great undercurrent of the psyche, the place where forgotten truths and unclaimed parts of the self dwell in quiet potency. While the conscious mind clings to logic, strategy, and control, the unconscious speaks in mystery, ambiguity, and paradox. The conscious mind, bound to linear time and social expectations, often resists what the unconscious offers. It resists because it fears dissolution. It resists because the truths of the unconscious do not always make immediate sense. They come cloaked in metaphor, delivered through intuition, bodily sensation, or sudden, irrational emotion. They emerge when you are vulnerable, when you are falling apart, not holding it together. And yet, it is precisely in those moments of unraveling that the unconscious begins to reveal its medicine. The conscious mind would have you believe that healing is found in willpower, planning, or moral discipline. But the unconscious knows otherwise. It knows that the soul cannot be healed through control. It knows that integration comes not through perfection, but through wholeness, the acceptance of both shadow and light, the acknowledgement of contradiction without the need to resolve it. We often resist the very experiences that are trying to awaken us. We resist sorrow, not realizing it contains the seed of compassion. We resist fear, not seeing it as a doorway to deeper trust. We resist uncertainty, not knowing it is the threshold to authentic transformation. The unconscious holds all these elements within it, not as problems to be solved, but as elements to be integrated. It is not uncommon for dreams to disturb us, for symbols to emerge in our psyche that we cannot explain, for recurring thoughts or images to haunt the edges of our awareness. These are not random. These are messages from the deep, expressions from within that the conscious mind has either forgotten, denied, or suppressed. The more we resist these messengers, the more they take on darker forms. What we do not meet in awareness returns to us as fate. The unconscious does not vanish because we ignore it. It simply becomes more insistent. And yet, when we begin to turn toward the unconscious, something miraculous begins to happen. Life becomes rich with meaning again. A dream is no longer just a fragment of sleep. It is a symbol of the soul's longing. A synchronicity is no longer a coincidence. It is the outer world mirroring your inner state. An emotion is no longer an enemy. It is a guide. When we learn to read the language of the unconscious, the world itself becomes a sacred text. This language is not always gentle. It will show you what you are hiding from. It will strip away illusions you have built your identity around. It will confront you with your own contradictions. But it does so not to punish, but to liberate. For the unconscious holds the blueprint of your becoming. It contains the parts of you that the world asked you to abandon in order to be accepted. Your wildness, your creativity, your rage, your tenderness, your forgotten dreams. The conscious mind prefers certainty and control, but the unconscious moves according to deeper laws, laws of transformation, of descent and return, of death and rebirth. These are not linear processes, they are spiral. They bring you back to the same themes again and again, but at deeper levels each time, and in that spiral, something sacred is occurring. The self is being remembered. The soul is being restored to its rightful place. To open to the unconscious is not to abandon rationality, but to expand the field of knowing. It is to trust that you are more than your thoughts, that you are being shaped by forces both ancient and intelligent, that you are part of a mythic unfolding far greater than your plan. The more you allow space for what you do not yet understand, the more you begin to feel the alignment of something greater moving through your life. The unconscious knows your essence. It knows the path you are meant to walk, even when you have forgotten. It is not bound by social masks or cultural scripts. It is wild, wise, and endlessly deep. It will keep speaking, through illness, through longing, through dreams, until you remember that everything you are seeking outwardly has always lived within. There is a point in the soul's journey where striving becomes suffering, where effort begins to tighten rather than liberate, where control, once mistaken for strength, is revealed to be a barrier between you and the truth of your becoming. It is here, at this inner threshold, that surrender first whispers your name, not as a command, but as an invitation not to give up, but to give over, not to collapse, but to yield to a deeper intelligence already at work within you. Surrender is one of the most misunderstood movements of the human spirit. The ego calls it weakness. The world sees it as defeat, but the psyche knows otherwise. The unconscious, timeless in its wisdom, recognizes surrender as a sacred turning point, the moment when the conscious mind steps aside and allows the self to emerge from the shadows. This kind of surrender is not passive. It is not the resignation of the helpless, nor the apathy of the disengaged. It is the act of stepping aside so that the truth buried within you, the truth that cannot be controlled or predicted, might rise and shape your life from the inside out. Surrender is not the absence of will. It is the realignment of will with the deeper pulse of your soul. To surrender is to release the belief that you must do everything alone. It is to unhook from the illusions of dominance, perfection, and absolute certainty. It is to come into contact with the vulnerable center of your being, the place where your deepest pain and your deepest longing are indistinguishable, and from that place to allow something ancient, something vast and nameless, to move through you without resistance. In surrender, you stop trying to fix what is not broken. You stop trying to change the seasons of your life with the force of your preferences. You learn to watch, to listen, to trust the intelligence of grief, the necessity of stillness, the holiness of not knowing. You begin to recognize that there is a current beneath your actions, a rhythm beneath your thoughts, and that life itself has a will that does not always obey the strategies of the mind. The self that emerges through surrender is not the self you plan to become. It is the self that was buried beneath the expectations, the roles, the masks. It is the self that survived all your attempts to escape yourself, and it does not arrive loudly. It does not demand recognition. It reveals itself gradually in quiet moments of clarity, in unexpected tenderness, in the strange peace that comes from no longer needing to understand everything. There is something deeply archetypal about this process. All mythic transformations require a descent into the underworld, into the unknown, into the unconscious. Surrender is the descent. It is the symbolic death of the ego's illusions, the crumbling of old identities, the loosening of the grip you had on who you thought you needed to be. And though it feels like loss, it is also a return to wholeness, a return to the inner source from which you were never truly separate. But the path of surrender cannot be forced. It is not a task to be achieved, but a state to be allowed. It happens in moment, often small and unnoticed, when you stop fighting what is, when you let the storm pass without needing to understand its purpose, when you choose stillness over struggle, silence over certainty, when you let the heart break open without rushing to put it back together. Surrender requires deep courage, for it means allowing the mystery to lead. It means trusting that something meaningful is unfolding even when you cannot see the outcome. It means embracing paradox, that losing your way may be how you find your soul, that falling apart may be how the real self is born, that in letting go you do not become less, you become more fully what you were always meant to be. There is a quiet intelligence at the heart of life, something beyond comprehension, beyond control. It moves like water, shaping the path it takes by listening to the landscape, not conquering it. We call this alignment. Not alignment with what we think should be, but with what is already moving underneath, beyond the surface patterns, beneath the ego's grasp. And this alignment does not come through effort, resistance, or force. It comes through deep and radical acceptance. Force is the ego's strategy for survival. It pushes, manipulates, demands. It believes that through sheer will, life can be bent to its preferences. But the soul does not respond to force. The deeper self is not a machine to be programmed, nor a problem to be solved. It is a living field of energy and meaning, responsive, mysterious, and infinitely complex. When we try to impose order on it through control, We disrupt its natural rhythm. We lose the signal. We create distortion. True alignment begins the moment we stop trying to shape life from the outside and begin listening to what life is shaping within. This kind of listening requires presence. It requires us to sit with discomfort, ambiguity, even chaos, without immediately reaching for solutions. And in this stillness, in this vulnerable space of allowing, something begins to shift, not externally, but within the psyche itself. Acceptance is not the same as passivity. It is not a quiet agreement with suffering or injustice. Rather, it is the deep recognition of what is, before the mind can categorize it as good or bad, wanted or unwanted. Acceptance is the foundation of inner clarity. It is what allows the unconscious to move into conscious awareness, not as something to be judged, but as something to be integrated. When we accept our pain rather than resist it, it softens. When we accept our fear, it transforms into wisdom. When we accept our confusion, insight begins to emerge, not through effort, but through presence. This is the law of inner alchemy. Nothing can evolve until it is first fully seen and embraced in the form it already takes. Many people spend years, decades, trying to force their lives into alignment by chasing the next relationship, job, identity, or spiritual system. But they remain restless, unsatisfied, because they are not aligning with their truth. They are performing an idea of alignment. Authentic alignment does not look polished or perfect. It looks real. It begins with the willingness to accept where you actually are, not where you think you should be. This acceptance creates space. And in that space, the deeper patterns of your life begin to reveal themselves. You begin to notice the symbols that keep returning, the dreams that speak louder than your daytime thoughts, the subtle attractions and repulsions that point toward your inner compass. This is the wisdom of the psyche, an order that cannot be engineered, only invited, and it only responds to honesty. Alignment is not a single destination. It is a state of being that fluctuates and evolves. Some days it is clear, fluid, graceful. Other days it is jagged, obscured, uncertain. But in both states, the process is sacred. When you stop demanding that life feel a certain way and begin honoring how it actually feels, you return to the flow that was never truly absent, only obscured by resistance. And so much of that resistance is inherited. We carry unconscious beliefs that say we must earn rest, prove our worth, or force success. But these beliefs do not come from the soul. They are the residue of a world obsessed with image and achievement. The soul cares little for appearances. It seeks congruence, wholeness, truth, and truth is always revealed when we stop struggling against what we are and begin embodying what we have always been. In acceptance, we return, not to some ideal version of ourselves, but to the raw, honest, evolving self, the one that was never broken, only buried. In that return, life begins to align, not because we controlled it, but because we finally allowed it to be what it already was trying to become. At the edge of every transformation lies chaos, not the chaos of recklessness or destruction for its own sake, but the primordial chaos, the fertile disorder from which new life is born. This kind of chaos is not your enemy, it is your initiator. It arrives when the old structures within you can no longer hold the truth you are becoming. It breaks down what is rigid so that something more alive can emerge. We fear chaos because we misunderstand its nature. We are taught to associate it with failure, with breakdown, with the dissolution of everything we have built. But chaos in its deepest form is sacred. It is the space between stories, the rupture in the narrative that allows the unconscious to speak. It strips away illusions, not to harm you, but to show you what is real beneath what is constructed. The conscious mind strives for control, for predictability, for clarity. But the soul moves differently. It is cyclical, symbolic, wild, and when the soul is ready to evolve, it often invites chaos as a means of reordering the psyche from the inside out. What looks like falling apart on the outside may actually be a deeper integration within, a recalibration of the inner compass. Consider the moments in your life when everything you thought was stable suddenly dissolved. The job lost, the relationship shattered, the identity questioned. In the immediate aftermath, it feels like ruin. But if you look closely, you'll notice something else was also occurring beneath the surface. A kind of quiet reorientation. You were being forced into presence, into truth, into the raw terrain of the unfiltered self. Chaos dismantles the masks we wear, not to expose us to ridicule, but to free us from confinement. It disrupts the habitual patterns that keep us asleep. It interrupts the ego's storylines so that the deeper self, the archetypal self, can emerge with clarity and authority. The more you resist this chaos, the more violent it becomes. But when you begin to trust its function, you see that it is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to awaken you. In the mythic tradition, chaos is always the precursor to order. The cosmos itself was born from chaos, not from control. So too is the psyche. Each time chaos visits your life, it carries a symbolic potential, the chance to reimagine your relationship to meaning, to identity, to the mystery at the core of your existence. This is not the order you create by organizing your schedule or perfecting your routine. It is a deeper order, an order of alignment, of inner resonance, of psychological wholeness. This kind of order cannot be constructed by force. It must be revealed through experience, often painful, often disorienting. The psyche does not evolve through comfort. It evolves through confrontation with what has been repressed, denied, forgotten. Chaos brings these elements to the surface, not randomly, but with a kind of archetypal precision. It knows exactly what must be undone for the deeper truth to rise. It is in this undoing that we are made whole, not by returning to the way things were, but by stepping into the version of ourselves that was always waiting to be born. The storm clears the sky. The fire reduces the old form to ash, so that the seed buried beneath might finally break open. But this birth does not happen in haste. It unfolds in layers, in dreams, in sudden insight, in moments of unbearable silence where the soul speaks louder than thought. Chaos asks you to surrender certainty, to release the need to know where this is going. It invites you to stand in the threshold, between the no longer and the not yet, and listen for the deeper order beginning to emerge. You may not recognize it at first. It may feel like loss, like confusion, like groundlessness, but within that groundlessness is the ground of being itself, a stillness you cannot reach by striving, a knowing you cannot access by intellect alone. There is a wisdom born only in disorder, a clarity that comes only when everything familiar falls away. In those moments, something ancient stirs within you, the part of you that remembers how to navigate the dark, how to trust the unseen, how to follow the thread of your soul even when the map has burned. There is a tempo to the soul that cannot be rushed. It does not move according to calendars, deadlines, or strategic milestones. It unfolds like the tide, mysteriously, rhythmically, governed by a force outside the grasp of the rational mind. The soul is not a servant to your plans. It is not concerned with achievement, recognition, or how fast you progress. It cares only for truth, depth, and inner coherence. We live in a world that exalts the linear. It worships acceleration, productivity, and performance. And in that pursuit, we often lose contact with the organic rhythm of our becoming. We attempt to schedule our growth, to optimize our transformation, to package our healing into neat, predictable stages. But the soul refuses such domestication. It resists being turned into a project. It is wild, and it speaks in symbols, not spreadsheets. The soul moves in spirals, not straight lines. It circles back through old wounds, not to regress, but to reveal layers that were not yet ready to be seen. What the ego calls delay, the soul understands as deepening. What the conscious mind calls failure, the soul knows as preparation. There are seasons of emergence and seasons of retreat, and neither can be rushed without violence to the psyche. When you try to force the soul into a schedule, it doesn't speed up. It shuts down. It hides. It waits until you are willing to release the illusion of control and surrender to something more ancient and wise than your immediate preferences. And this surrender is not passive. It is active participation in the mystery. It is the choice to align with the inner world even when the outer world demands urgency. So many people live in tension because they are comparing their soul's timing to someone else's path. They measure their worth against external markers, and in doing so, they abandon the internal compass. But the soul has its own logic. It incubates slowly. It reveals only what you are ready to integrate. It may hold back insight not out of cruelty, but because wisdom, if given too soon, becomes a burden instead of a blessing. There is nothing to be gained by forcing the soul to move faster. Insight does not arrive by demand. Healing does not unfold because you put it in your schedule. Awakening is not something you can accomplish by effort alone. The soul requires spaciousness, silence, time. It needs you to stop long enough for the unconscious to speak, to emerge not as a shout, but as a whisper rising from beneath the threshold of ordinary awareness. Often, the soul's guidance comes in moments you are least prepared to receive it. In a dream that leaves you shaken, in a sudden loss that empties your identity, in a synchronicity that challenges your logic. These are not interruptions to your life. They are the life you came here to live, breaking through the illusion of control. And when you begin to trust them, when you begin to honor them as part of a deeper rhythm, your entire orientation begins to shift. You no longer ask, "How fast can I get there?" But instead, "What is being revealed right here?" You stop demanding clarity and begin cultivating receptivity. You learn to wait, not with impatience, but with devotion. For the soul is not a problem to be solved. It is a landscape to be walked, slowly, reverently, with the kind of attention that notices what lies just beneath the surface. This is the great paradox of depth work. The more you let go of your agenda, the more life begins to align with something greater than your will. You stop chasing meaning and begin embodying it. You stop striving to become and begin remembering what you already are.